Dear students, welcome back in my class of CIS 2168 Data Driven Design. This is part 2 of Statistical Significance and we are in week number 6. In part number 1, I explained what is the meaning of statistical significance and we find out the answer for 3 key questions. Number 1 is what is statistical significance, why statistical significance, and how to apply statistical significance. In this session, we'll explore it further and we'll try to understand hypothesis, statistical hypothesis, and the role of p-value in statistical significance. This is what we are going to do in part number 2. I have given the aim and objective for week 6 session in the next slide. So I already explained the aim for week 6, that is statistical significance, and we want to understand some statistical tests. We completed objective 1. This one is completed in part number 1 video lecture, and in this part, that is in part number 2, we will explore this one, statistical hypothesis, and this one, and in part number 3 we will discuss this. So we will first understand what is this hypothesis and p-value. So before explaining hypothesis and p-value, I will explain some example for statistical significance. So here you can see there are 2 samples given. I am calling the first sample as sample 1 and the name of sample 2 is sample 2. And these 2 samples have been drawn from population P. Suppose P is my population, and this population has all these values, that is 12, 15, 10, 11, 21, 16, 18, 13. So 13 is here, 17, 12 is the same. So 12, then 14, 15, 12, 13. So these are the values taken for sample 1 and these are the values taken for sample 2. It does not mean that this population P has only these many values. This population have n number of values, more than what you see here. So dealing with large volume of data which is given in population P is not possible. It is difficult. That is why it is written cannot count everything, so must sample. So you cannot count all the values given in population P. So what you will do to derive any conclusion for anything, you can create samples. In the last week you created sample A, sample B during the tutorial session to find out the value, mean value, median value, variance and percentile. So similarly here this sample A is nothing but just like sample 1 and sample 2, and these samples have been drawn from a large volume of data and we call that large volume of data as a population. So sample 1 has been drawn from population P and sample 2 is also drawn from population P. So we want to analyze that we want to perform a statistical significance. So on what basis? The basis is are the 2 samples, that is sample 1 and sample 2, drawn from the same population. So we want to see the sample A1 and sample 2 is drawn from the same population or not. So in order to find out the answer of this question, what you can do, you can perform statistical significance. How we will discuss later on. So this type of question if you get, then by applying statistical significance you can reach to some outcome. In the next slide I have given Again, one example. So this is the same example. So this data is given here, that is sample 1, and the same data is given here, that is sample 2. So what you will do for performing for finding the answer of this question, we will create a hypothesis, that is statistical significance is equal to, it is unlikely that the two samples are from the same population. So we can say the first argument will be, we will say like this, and if this is true, we will say the truthness of this argument, and if this is true, then the data from sample 1 and sample 2 have not been drawn from the same population. But if it is false, it means that the data drawn from the two samples and drawn from the same population are sample 1 and sample 2 are drawn from the same population. So if you are doing this kind of thing, that is, you are making some statement and you are checking the truthness of that statement, so this type of statement is referred as hypothesis, which we'll discuss in the next slide. Hypothesis, and in short, we represent it by using capital H. H indicates hypothesis. Now, if you want to apply hypothesis on your samples, so you need to frame two hypotheses. First hypothesis is referred as H0 and second hypothesis is called as HA. So H0, it is known as null hypothesis. And this hypothesis A, here A indicates assumed hypothesis. So we'll discuss what is null hypothesis in the next slide. So I hope hypothesis is clear to everyone. Now we'll move to the next slide, and it is for null hypothesis. So here you can see H0. I already explained what is the meaning of H0. H0 indicates null hypothesis. So what is null hypothesis? The claim is the two samples have been drawn from the same population. So this is null hypothesis. And we will calculate how likely it is that H0 is wrong. So we want to see H0 is wrong or it is right. If it is wrong, it means that the two samples have drawn from the same population. If it is wrong, it means that they are the two samples, sample 1 and sample 2, are drawn from different population. If it is wrong. But if it is right, it means that both the population S1 and S2 have been drawn from the same population. So this is how you can frame your null hypothesis. Another example I will give to make you understand what is the meaning of H0, how you will understand H0 and HA. Suppose there is a person and this person has name, let's say I'm calling his name is David. And what has happened? Many people in his society, what they are saying that David is a murderer. And they filed a case in the law of court. So what will happen? So in the law of court, judge is here. What he will do? He will not make judgment immediately against the David. What he will do? He will listen what the lawyer L1, who is for David, and lawyer L2, who is against the David. So what lawyer L1 is saying and what lawyer L2 is saying. So lawyer L1 will provide the evidence to in the law of court in favor of David, and he will provide the evidence against the David. So H0 is David is murderer, and HA is David is not murderer. Not a murderer. So what will happen? Based on the evidence lawyer 1 is showing in the law of court, and based on the evidence lawyer 2 is showing in the law of court, judge will see what is true. Null hypothesis is true or assume hypothesis is true. If there is enough evidence to prove that David is murderer, it means that H0 is true, and the judge will make judgment that David is a murderer. On the other hand, if the evidence is enough to prove that David is not a murderer, it means that this is true. H0 is wrong. It indicates that David is not a murderer. So this is how you will frame your H0 and HA. And hypothesis is very important concept in statistical significance, because based on your hypothesis you will apply different statistical tests on your data. Next we will see level of significance, and it is also referred as p-value. So here you can see p-value, or it is also called as level of significance. So what statisticians generally do for applying a statistical test, they use a value which is called as p-value, and it provides the level of significance, or using this we can set degree of freedom. So p-value of an event fall below particular level, then event is considered statistical significant. So if you are saying 95% confidence interval or 99% level of confidence in interval, then what you are doing, you are talking about the p-values, and it is summarized in the next slide. So here you can see 0.05. So the probability is 0.05. It means that less than 5% chance. 0.01% means 1% chance. 0.001% means less than 0.1% chance. So this is 95%, this is 99%, and this is 99.99%. So you are saying that you are 95% confident that something is true or something is false. You are 99% sure that H0 is false or H0 is true. You are 99.99% sure or confident that the H0 is true or false. So in order to do this, what we do, we use a value which is called as p-value. So these all are nothing but the p-value, and we compare the p-value. Suppose you are having a sample S1, you have sample S2, so you will determine the p-value for S1, sample S1, and you will find out the p-value for S2. You will compare the p-value with these values. That is, if p-value is less than 0.05, then what will happen? P-value is less than 0.01%, then what will happen? So similarly, you will check for the last value. So p-value basically helps in finding the level of significance for the hypothesis. Next, we'll discuss statistical test in part 3 of week 6 lecture. So that's all from my side in this part. Thank you very much.